As Faylene said, our presentation is going to be introducing you to CELA's new audiobook player that we're going to be launching as a regular service to all of our patrons. So I'll give you sort of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, and then we'll get into the content. So first, I'll begin by giving you some background, a little bit of context that will explain why the Envoy Connect became an option for delivering listening to accessible audiobooks. And it'll be something to do with something called the Expanded Delivery Options Project. We'll talk about that in a few slides. And then we'll talk about what the launch is actually going to involve when we actually launch the player. We'll get into the basics of the Envoy Connect player, what it is, how it works. Iwana will give a demonstration of that. You'll get to hear and see what it sounds like and how books are actually played on it. Then I will talk about our accompanying software called the CELA Connect software. I'll give you the basics of that. That is a software that's going to be used for managing books on the player. So we're going to do that, and I'll give you a demonstration of a surface level understanding of how to use that software. And then Iwana will come over and talk about some FAQs that will be useful for you. And then we'll go into where to purchase, where you can find all of our learning resources for the player, and then we'll take questions afterwards. So that is what we're going to cover. And now, to get started, there's this idea that CELA is always doing its best to provide many choices in materials, formats, and delivery options to keep up with technology, because we know that technology is always changing. One day we think we know all the apps and devices that are out there, the next day something changes. And what that means is that we're continuing to offer new options for our patrons to use to access books. And along this line, we're excited to soon be launching at the end of this month our new audiobook player. But how did this idea come into being of using the audiobook player as an option? It came into being with this idea of the pilot project that we conducted called the Expanded Delivery Options Project. It ran from 2021 to 2022. And the goal of this pilot project was to test new audiobook delivery options. We tested 3 different things. We tested the Envoy Connect player, which is what we're going to be talking about today. We tested a smart speaker option and ability to listen to audiobooks through smart speakers like the Alexa. And we also tested another audiobook player. But based on the positive feedback that we got from our participants, we are moving forward with the Envoy Connect. Most of our participants generally really liked the player. So why Envoy Connect? Well, the Envoy Connect is a simple to use, portable, and low-tech option for listening to audiobooks. You don't really need much technical experience to use the player, to learn to use the player. And it comes with a software that we have called the CELA Connect software, and that will allow you to easily add and delete books from the player at home. So what will the launch involve? It's going to happen at the end of May, and the Envoy Connect will become available for purchase at our vendor called CNIB Smart Life. It'll be purchased. It will be available for purchase for $97. And the CELA Connect software will be available for free for download on the CELA website. On our CELA website, that's the place where you can also get user guides, tutorials, videos and audio guides, and all kinds of resources that will help you become familiar with how the player works and what it does. This player will allow people to access books from their CELA direct-to-player bookshelf. So let's go over some of the basics of the Envoy Connect player. So first we'll start with what exactly is the Envoy Connect player. It's a simple handheld audiobook player. It's about the size of, well, it fits in the palm of your hand. That's how small it is. It's about the size of a small remote control. And the idea is that audiobooks can be loaded onto it using our CELA Connect software, which is integrated with our CELA Direct Player Bookshelf service that we have. It requires a computer for reloading because it doesn't have any internet or Bluetooth capabilities. There's an image of it here on this slide, and this player can be thought of as kind of like an MP3 player that they had before music streaming services were available and people could load files onto it. So that's kind of the idea of what this player is. So what are some pros and cons of the player? The pros are that the player is compact, it's very lightweight, it's small enough to fit into a pocket or a purse, and it's simple to use, and it's very low tech. You can probably learn to use the basics of it within 5 to 10 minutes, and it's low cost, and the keypad can easily be distinguished by sight and by touch. So unlike a lot of the players out there that have a touch screen capability, this one doesn't. It's got nicely formulated buttons that can be felt and can be seen easily. It has audible and visual indicators that'll tell you what the player is doing. There will be lights that flash and beeps that go off, and the idea is to learn to listen to what those cues mean. It has both a headphone jack and an onboard speaker for listening. But just like every device, it also has some cons. And those are that it only provides basic audio navigation. What that means is it doesn't have playback speed or tone control or bookmarks. So other audiobook players will allow you to know where you are in a book. It'll allow you to adjust how fast or how slow the book is being read aloud. This doesn't do that. It just plays the book. Some people with mobility challenges or dexterity issues might find that the buttons are too small for them to control and to manipulate. The player doesn't have any spoken feedback is the next con about it. So people who are relying on the player to speak to them and tell you what it's doing, like if somebody's totally blind, they won't be finding that in this player. And the next one is that it needs a computer to load books.
Yes, hello. So now that Charmaine has presented the player a little bit, let's discuss how can we load books on this player. We have basically three main options. One is, as Charmaine indicated, the CELA Connect software that has been specially designed by CELA, and you can use this to load books from the CELA collection, from the CELA library, from the comfort of your own home, or you can have a library do that for the patron, or a designate, or so it gives you a lot of flexibility, and the program is, as you will see, pretty easy and straightforward to use. The second option for people that do not have the option to connect to a computer or find this too complicated, or might be used to CDs, for example, they can send the Envoy Connect to CELA using for free because of the program of Mail Canada, Free Matter for the Blind. And CELA will load the books for you. And for people that you can also, the third option would be basically a combination between the previous two. So sometimes maybe you have a designate or a library that can load it for you, but sometimes you could also choose to send it to CELA and it will come back to you loaded with a batch of new reading material. So now let's discuss a little bit the Envoy Connect, and I will start my video, hopefully. Can you confirm that it's on? Hopefully, can you see the Envoy Connect?
Yep.
Yeah, good, thank you. So, as you can see, it is a really small device, and now we can see what Charmaine mentioned, the speaker, which is on top, and underneath the raised row of buttons. I'll go over them very quickly because I will also give you a demonstration, but just to give you an overview. So we have the function of the buttons would be the following. We have the volume control, upper left, so to turn a volume up or down, the bookshelf button to select books, the sleep timer, then we have the back button on the lower row left, and the middle, a very big, nice, distinguishable round concave button for power and play, and the forward button on the lower right. Now let's look at the other options of this great player. On the bottom edge we have, and let me see if you can see that, hopefully, we have a headphone jack. So it is very practical if you want to listen with more privacy and you don't want everybody to hear where you're at in your book. We have the micro USB cable connection port, which will be used either to charge the player and you can charge it with the provided USB cable that comes with the player, either in your by connecting it to a computer or by connecting it to a power outlet, a wall charger. Finally, we have a very nice feature that might be useful to some, micro SD card slots, so you can expand the storage of the player, which is by default 8 gigabytes. You can add an SD card. Finally, some other new interesting features. Let me show you the back of the player. The back of the player, that one of the interesting features, and I think it's quite unique for the Envoy Connect, is this solar panel. And that is, let's say you're going camping and you don't have any way of charging your player, you don't need to run out of books, and you can use the solar panel here at the top to put it in direct sunlight, and it will charge somewhat slowly. And I guess we're at the mercy of good weather, I suppose, but it is a nice option to have. You also have the printed label with the serial number and the model number, which can be useful for troubleshooting. We have the reset button, which might be hard to see, but again, might be useful in case of troubleshooting needs. And there is also at the top a hole for a lanyard that is also provided for extra convenience to carry it around. Yeah, so that's the quick tour of the player. Now I will give you a little demo. Enough talking about the player, let's see it in action. The first thing we'll do is I will turn it on, and hopefully you can hear. So I'm pressing the power and play button.
Envoy Connect Quick Start Guide. Last updated March 2023.
Okay,
What's in the box?
So what the player does, it plays a little bit of the last book we heard, which happens to be the user guide that comes preloaded on the Quick Start Guide comes preloaded on each player, and it is language specific, which is kind of nice. So if somebody has a language profile in French, you can have it in French. Then we can select with the bookshelf button which book
1.
we want to hear.
Le Médianoche. The Great Bridge. The epic
So let's
story
say I
of
want
the
to hear
building
the
of
Great
Brooklyn
Bridge. I will place the play button.
The Great Bridge.
Okay.
The epic story of the building of the Brooklyn
So
Bridge.
now it is
By
playing
David G. McCullough.
the book. I press and pause. Excuse me, mister. Yes, okay. So the same, the pause, the play button is also, of course, the pause button. You can go forward by, now let's skip forward.
Library of Congress. Contents.
I'm skipping forward through sections by pressing the forward button.
It is now Author's Note. Part 1. 1. The plan. 2.
Okay, backwards, the same thing.
The plan.
Now, if I press and hold the forward and back buttons, you can kind of go, not unlike a tape recorder, you can go through the section in 30-second intervals.
The plan.
Each beep indicates a 30-second jump.
Been probably considered.
Okay, obviously the volume up and down, I don't think that needs much explanation. And we have finally the nice sleep button, which allows us to set a timer so that the player turns off after 15, 30, and 60 minutes. And you hear that we got audio feedback, these little beeps indicating which setting it's at. And now I will deactivate it and we'll hear some lower beeps. Yep, so that is a nice brief, I put the player through its paces. I hope it gives you a bit of an idea of what you can expect. As you see the speaker, I hope you can see this is quite loud given its size. So it is one of the plus points for the speaker. And now I'll hand it over to Charmaine to discuss the CELA Connect software for loading the player.
Okay, so you got an understanding of what the player is now, and we're going to talk now about the CELA Connect software. That is the primary mode that, primary way that people can, the books can be managed on the player. It's very seamless, it's very easy. And so the CELA Connect software is, it's basically a free, accessible computer software that will allow you to download books onto the player and delete books off of it. So it runs on Windows 10 computers running Windows 10 or later. It doesn't run on a Mac. It requires internet access to be operated. But it is possible to load books for Mac users. We have instructions in our user guide. People can load, it will explain how people can load books onto the Envoy Connect using what we call the advanced manual loading mode feature. But our focus for now will be just this software. So the software called CELA Connect for people who have Windows computers is the best way to download books and get books off of the player. The software can be downloaded from the CELA website. We will give you the link. And so how we get started with using CELA Connect is first, just like any other software out there, you would download and install it. And then the next step would be, we'll go over this in action in a minute, but you plug in the Envoy Connect into your computer, you open the software, and then you launch the software. Then it will automatically log you in, or you can manually log in with your library credentials. Then you can start to choose the books that you want to download and choose the books that you want to remove from the player. Then you'd confirm the selection, and then the software will guide you through basically all that it's doing, as you'll see in a few seconds. It's very self-explanatory because on every screen, the software will explain what's happening and what you need to do to continue. So right now I'm going to try and I'm going to share my screen and actually show you what this sounds like and looks like. Okay. I'm assuming now that everyone can see my screen, and if not, let me know. So what happens is You go to the CELA website and the link that we'll provide, and then you download the software. And when you download the software, what happens is it downloads really quick. You go into your downloads folder and then press the install button, and then it will start to install. So once it installs, it's going to launch itself. And when it launches itself, it's going to display this screen that we're on right now. This is the first screen of what we call the content update process. And this screen is going to tell us whether it detects a player or not. Right now, I don't have a player connected. So it says, plug your Envoy Connect player into the computer. See, this is how easy it is. It's going to tell you exactly what it needs you to do. So now I'm going to plug my player in, and you'll notice that the screen is going to change. Now it says that an Envoy Connect player has been plugged in. You will now be connected to the library service. And now we've got some buttons. So we press continue. And then if a person's player is registered with us with CELA, like mine is, it's going to start to log you in. So that's what's happening now on this screen. You can see the username, you can see the player serial number, and then a little status bar that tells you it's logging you in, and then it says, please wait, checking your bookshelf. What this means is it's bringing up, it says checking your bookshelf, which can be a bit confusing, but basically it's bringing up all the books that it finds on the player. So this is the first screen that comes up once it logs you in. It says, this is the list of titles on your Envoy Connect player. This is all the titles that it found that are currently on it that you loaded using the software, not any kind of books or files that you loaded manually, but any books that you loaded using the software. And you're supposed to select one or more titles from the list to remove it. So we can see here that we have some books here, the Berenstain Bears, Holiday Audio Collection, other books like that. And the idea is that there are checkboxes like you would see in any other software. And you can select like this as many books as you like. I'm just checking the boxes here and I'm unchecking. There's also the option to select all of them or deselect all of them. So right now, let's just say for the sake of example, that I'm going to download one book, the Berenstain Bears Holiday Audio Collection. It'll download in just a second because it's nice and short. So to do that, I'm going to select it by checking the little checkbox. So now it's checked, and then I'm going to hit next. Now this is the next screen. Actually, the first screen is the list of titles that we saw is the list of titles that we're going to remove from the player, not to download. I mixed it up. So now this is the next screen. This is the list of titles on your CELA direct-to-player bookshelf that you can download onto the player. So the first screen was books that are on the player for removal, and now it's for download. So let's just choose a book that we're going to download from our direct-to-player bookshelf. Let's pick this one, Cinderella Smith. We're going to download it onto our player, and then we're going to hit next. And now we have a confirmation screen. It says you are about to remove one title, which is what was happening on the first screen. We chose the Berenstain Bears book to remove from the player. And then we're going to download one title onto the player, which is the Cinderella book that we chose. If we're happy with our selection, we press next. If we want to go back, we can press back or cancel. So I'm going to hit next. And it's going to tell you what it's doing in percentages. So it's saying now that it's removing, and then it happens really quickly because the books are short. It's removing the book. Now it's downloading the new book onto the player. And now we wait. It's important at this stage of the game to not disconnect the player, not do anything, and let this screen do its thing as it updates content. Now we're just removing one book and downloading another book. It's going to happen really quickly. But if you're doing a lot of books, it's going to take some time. So what you want to get to is this screen, which is, it says your content has been updated. You can now unplug the player. And this is the cue for you to hit OK. And then exit. And then it's important to use standard procedures to disconnect the software, just like how you would disconnect a regular flash drive or a USB stick in File Explorer. So now that's the end of the demo of CELA Connect and how it works. I'm going to pass it back to Ioana and go over, she's going to go over some FAQs and then close the presentation.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on the library's FAQs because you are the best people to ask us questions, so I will leave lots of time for questions. But now nevertheless, here are a few questions that probably will be useful and I'm sure are on your mind as you're exploring this new option. First of them is, can a library purchase this player for their patrons? And the answer is absolutely, and we hope by now that we've convinced you that this is a great option because it's portable, it's low cost, it has 8 gigabytes of storage, and it's pretty easy to use. Of course, a footnote is that if you're purchasing it, this is really intended to be used just for people with print disabilities. So it could be, we think, and I hope you'll agree, a great addition to the library's accessible services. And the other question that we might ask is, can we, speaking of CELA content, can we use other books? Can we load other books onto the player? And the answer is yes, but kind of. It is possible, and we will not be covering this necessarily. So it is possible by using the manual loading, and you can find more details in the user guide. It plays all sorts of formats such as WAV, MP3, WMA, OGG, and more, FLAC and AAC and others. The only important thing to note is that it will not play any files with digital rights management, such as files from Hoopla or other basically services that have right protection. Any other files, if you happen to load files that are not supported, will cause errors. You have to be careful when you're loading manually files that you have to put all files that are on a book, that are part of a book, they have to be contained in one folder. And of course, you can find more info about it in the user guide. We recommend that you consider purchasing a case for the player, because sometimes people can maybe it makes it easier or more protected to carry, or it's easier to keep everything together. The accessories, maybe the headphones that come with it. So there is no specific case, but you can, just buy one that fits it. Although the player has a micro USB cable that is provided, we suspect that it might be a useful thing to have some backups, and note that you need to have micro USB cables that are data enabled. Some really only charge a device, so just make sure that if you're getting them that they're data micro USB cables. Also, we recommend that you point new users and that you are very aware and familiar with all the useful resources about Envoy Connect and CELA Connect on the CELA webpage. And you have the link there, CELA Connect slash, it's called celalibrary.ca/help/envoy-connect. Finally, you might want to put a label on the Envoy Connect if it's a library-only player for identifying it. And we have posted here the type of label that works best. It's Avery 5167, and it fits nicely on the back of the device. Finally, where can we get more info about all these? Because there are many questions that are answered in the FAQ page for libraries that you can see on our webpage, and you have the link posted in the slideshow. And we also have, of course, general help and tutorials, audio tutorials, video tutorials, you name it. Some specific for screen reader users that you can point our patrons to, and all sorts of guides in various formats that will be added, and some of them are already available at launch. And again, you see the web page on the screen. Yes, so this is kind of a quick overview. Like I said, there are many more questions. I'm looking forward to hearing yours. And also, you can explore more other questions on our webpage. So I hope that you will be just as excited. I hope you'll be just excited as we are to launch this player and to see it added as a new option for accessible reading. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and looking forward to taking your questions. It's time for your questions now.
All right, thanks very much for all that information. So I know that Holly has been answering some of the questions that have come up in the chat, but just let me, so someone says, does it come with headphones? So I'll just let whichever one of you wants to answer, go ahead.
Yes, it does come with headphones, and the ability to listen to audiobooks through the external speaker. So you have both options.
Great. Someone else asks, does Envoy Connect keep your place in a book?
Absolutely, and I should have mentioned that one. Yes, it keeps your place in every book that you have played. So even if it runs out of battery and you restart it, it will remember it. You cannot add your own bookmarks, but it will remember your last playing position.
And Christina asks, how would a patron go about purchasing their own unit? I think basically they would contact CNIB Smart Life, and that information was also on one of the slides. But if there's anything else to add, please go ahead, guys. Holly, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying that's correct.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, and we can send a link to the slides also after.
Yes, definitely. I'm going to be sending out an email asking participants to fill out a little webinar evaluation for us, so we could send that out at the same time. Kim asks, how does the speaker quality compare with a Daisy player?
Well, the speaker is very small, right? So it's, as you saw, it's for a tiny speaker, it's surprisingly loud, but to a handheld Daisy player, I've used both of them, and I think Ioana can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Daisy players do play out a little bit louder, just from what I've noticed. But for its size and all that it does, the player does have pretty decent audio quality from its speaker.
Yes.
You can also plug in an auxiliary speaker into that headphone jack, an external speaker if you have one, so that can expand the audio quality as well.
Yes, and of course, I mean, if you have the players that play CDs, they are likely even bigger. So, but you cannot compare apples to pears. You know, like it's a small speaker, so you have to compare with other small devices. And it compares reasonably well. But of course, if you're comparing it with a big tabletop device, it will sound differently.
And Lucia is asking, do books play one after the other, or do you need to pick which book to listen to first?
Well, it will start with the book you listened to last. So, and then if you do want to choose a different book, you can use the bookshelf button, as I demonstrated before, to kind of cycle through the books on your bookshelf. It is maybe noteworthy to know that you can only go one way. So let's say you've got 30 books on your bookshelf, and if you've just passed the book accidentally, you've pressed one time too many, you have to cycle through the whole list again until it comes around. You cannot go backwards through the list. But so yeah, that's how you would choose the book. I am pretty sure that once the book is finished, it will not automatically play the new book. Charmaine, you could maybe you know better. What's the behavior at the end of a book? But yeah.
It just stops playing, from what I'm pretty sure, and then it will make a chime saying you're at the end of a book, and then it'll stop, and then what you would do is press the bookshelf button and then choose the next book.
In other words, there's no risk of you falling asleep and waking up in a different book, basically.
Yes. Because every file is played separately. So that's kind of what the idea is.
Yeah.
Kim is asking whether there's a sleep function to the player.
Yes, there is a sleep timer on the bottom, the top right corner. Let me see if I can show the video again. Yeah, so it is the top right corner, the top right button with a little dot on it, and you press it and it cycles 15, 30, and 60 minutes of playback, and then it turns itself off. Yeah, and you get nice audio feedback with different types of beeps. So if people learn to recognize those, it can be quite accessible to use.
I noticed that there are a few questions in the chat about, because we had talked about having a limited number of sort of gently used Envoy Connect players that we're offering to libraries, basically on a first come, first served basis. So it's an incentive for you to complete the webinar evaluation, because there's a link in the webinar evaluation to our request form. So as I say, we do have a limited number, but we definitely, if you fill out the webinar evaluation and then click on the link to request one of the gently used players, we'll do our best to fulfill those requests. Okay, there's another question. Since Envoy Connect doesn't have Wi-Fi capability, I'm assuming it can be connected to a computer so that downloaded audio files can go onto the device by using the software. Thanks for confirming that. So if someone...
Yeah, so what I did actually in the demonstration, that was part of it. So it's a USB cable that it comes with. You would plug the smaller end of the USB cable into the port, the middle port at the bottom of the player. You'd plug the other end into an available USB port on your computer. It would connect, it would show up like an external drive, normally does. And then it would show up as an external drive as it normally does. And then what you would do is launch the software. It detects your player. That's the first screen that we saw in the demonstration. And then it would follow from there.
Great. And Holly has confirmed for the gently used envoys, there'll be a link in the survey email to a form to fill out for this request. And we'll get back to libraries to let you know if we're able to provide you with a player. Christina asks, are magazines also able to be downloaded onto this device from the CELA site?
Yeah, if you subscribe to magazines or you put any of our magazines onto your direct-to-player bookshelf, it will show up as available to be downloaded onto the Envoy Connect player. The magazines are in also in audio format. So basically the idea is that anything that goes on to the direct-to-player bookshelf that's in audio format will be showing up and then downloaded onto the player by the software.
Okay. And Kim, would any content which we can borrow as Daisy Disk be borrowed through CELA Connect? Just confirming that human voice narrated content is available.
I think the question, if I understand it correctly, is mainly asking whether human narrated audio books are going to be downloadable from the software. And that's what it's asking. Yeah. So if you put human narrated, if you select the format when you're putting books onto the direct-to-player bookshelf, as you normally would from the CELA website, the point is to select under the choose format direct-to-player, Daisy direct-to-player. You wouldn't be selecting Daisy CD, you'd be selecting Daisy direct-to-player, and then you'd be clicking the Get It button, and then it would go onto your direct-to-player bookshelf. Whatever you select, whether it be books in human narrated audio or synthetic audio, would be the books that would play.
Okay, great. Mandy asks, if we loan a device out, do we use the library's account to select and load the titles, or do we have to have the person set up their own CELA account?
So that's a good question. You can do both, basically. You can use your own account. The main thing is that you have to be aware that it shouldn't be necessarily added. There is a way to link the Envoy Connect to a specific account for ease of loading, but this is not an option that we recommend for libraries. But you can, when you use the CELA Connect software to load books, you can put in your library account and password and check the checkbox to remember it, and it will remember it on your specific computer. But just be mindful that if in other words, yes, you can do that, but you can also, if people not unlike with the Victor readers or other Daisy players you might have used, sometimes people might prefer to have books loaded from their own bookshelf, so you can do that as well by logging in with the software with the patron's account info. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, and then Trevor, repeating a question that was missed earlier, could you just load books onto the SD card and take that to your patron who has the player at home? It would save me biking out to each person twice a week and them being without books while I reload at the library.
Well, you'll find in the user guide that there are different, for CELA Connect, that there are different modes for loading books onto the player. And the idea is that you can slip, there's many ways to do what you want to do. But I think the quickest way would be to stick an SD card into the bottom of the Envoy Connect player, into the slot that's there, and then connect the player to your computer. It will show up as another drive. So the player will show up as one flash drive, like drive D, for example, and then the SD card is going to show up as another drive that's separate. And so what you can do is, using File Explorer, open that drive, and using any of the methods that's specified in either the CELA Connect software, which will let you load books onto your computer and then copy it on to this, or using the advanced manual loading mode, which we won't get into. That's also outlined in the documentation. Either of those two ways, whichever you feel comfortable exploring, is going to let you do what you want, which is put books onto the SD card only and not on the player.
Just one comment, just in case you were hoping that you can put if you plug in the SD card, you cannot then transfer the books from the SD card to the player. Once they're on the SD card, they will be played from the SD card.
Yeah,
so
that's right. It'll be separate.
No way for you to say plug in the SD card into an Envoy Connect and tell it, okay, grab these books from the SD card and play them from there. In case you were hoping that to do that, then that can't be done. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. It's just a separate, like the books that are on the player are separate, and the SD card books are going to be a separate place that can't be interchanged.
Okay. Maureen is asking, what do you recommend for cases? I'm assuming cases for the players and SD cards.
I'll let Holly take that one, or Charmaine. I have no idea. I've never used a case, but
I'll chime in here. There isn't like a case that is made for it. So it'd be kind of a at your own discretion kind of situation, whatever you think would protect it. So a little bit of a DIY, I would say. In terms of SD cards, it'll take anything up to 128 gigabytes. So, and it's a micro SD.
Thank you. Cassandra, so I could load the card in a player at the library, then take that card to the patron's home player, and they could access it on the card, which I would leave with them. So I assume they're talking about an SD card.
Likely, yes. So and we recommend that the safest way and the most reliable way is that you use the CELA Connect, and you can use CELA Connect to load the books onto the SD card. And again, you can look at those ways to do that in the manual. So I suppose it's possible. We have, to my knowledge, I have not personally tested it, but there's no reason why this should not work.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through it now. I haven't tested it either, but just from what I know about the player, it should let you do that, because it should cycle through all the books that are internally on the player first, and then it'll start to shift over to the books that are on the SD card when you press the bookshelf button that it detects. So that's how the storage is expanded, by putting the SD card in the first place. So yeah, it will let you do what you like, which is play books from the SD card.
And Rachel, who's at Mississauga Public Library, is just chiming in. My understanding is yes to that question of Cassandra's, but pay attention to the name of the folders.
Yeah, yeah, they can be quite finicky. And again, you have to have not exceed a certain number of. And again, if you're using CELA Connect, all the formatting will be taken care of for you. If you're using manual loading, then this becomes important.
And then there's a question from Jessica. Can you load books onto the SD card with a card reader, or does it need to be in a player?
No, I don't think it needs to be in a player. You could use CELA Connect and specify not a player, but an actual location on your computer where you want the things to be loaded. So theoretically, it can be done. I think it will, by default, you can get some books onto your desktop and then move that folder to your card player. We should point out, though, that the more steps in copying the files back and forth, sometimes it can be, it can be trickier just because of the player, the way it reads the files. If you might run into some kind of issues about it playing the books out of order, but basically, there are very interesting tech user cases that we haven't all tried out, but yeah, it could be possible, but we haven't tested them completely.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can work. It's just a matter of your own exploration of. I would recommend reading through what we specify of how exactly to make sure that those files play in the right order to avoid issues.
I'll chime in also here. The SD card with the card reader, it's in all of this is really falling under like the manual loading mode and like local computer mode within CELA Connect. So instructions are in there, but yeah, it does potentially, it's a little more complicated, I guess, than just using CELA Connect with the player.
Great. And I think Janice said, would it be possible to compile all these great questions from everyone along with answers provided and send it out? And Holly answered. Many of these questions are in the FAQ, which will be available on the website, but also we are recording the session and there'll be a transcript. So all of these questions and answers should be in that transcript. All right. It's almost 2 o'clock. There's one other question. Does a micro SD come with a purchase of an Envoy?
No, it is not included. It doesn't come provided, so you would need to get your own micro SD card.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the questions, but obviously you can contact us anytime. I've just put our contact information in there. If you have, other questions that pop up, and definitely the material that's on the website will be very useful. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone, and hopefully we'll be speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.